everyone, again, and thank you for coming tonight and for having me to do this presentation. So tonight we're going to be talking about adverse childhood experiences, stress, and health. And if you have no idea what that is, it's okay because I'm going to explain it. So let's get started. So normally when children have a healthy environment, they're able to build trust, identity, relationships, build their own conscience, and they can build concentration. This is all in a healthy environment. Now, children aren't always in a healthy environment. And so in that case, weeds start to grow. So some of these weeds can be thoughts that consist of adults can't be trusted, I'm worthless, I don't belong, no one cares, and I'm in danger. And so all of these thoughts come out from something that we call adverse childhood experiences. So I'm going to start to explain what that is. So adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which I'll probably start using throughout the presentation just so I don't have to keep saying it because it's long. ACEs are serious childhood traumatic experiences. They can harm children's developing brains. It changes how they respond to stress, which damages their immune system. And your immune system is, what you use to fight diseases. And the effects of this can show up years and years later. So to give context to what exactly are some examples of ACEs, like what am I talking about? What are all these traumatic experiences? If you look where the tree is, you can see to the left of the screen, you can see what people normally consider when we think of trauma. So for example, abuse, bullying, domestic violence, parents that have gone through divorce, a parent that has dealt with mental illness, emotional or sexual abuse, having an incarcerated family member. These are all considered household ACEs, but these are all things that affect children. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but some of the things that I'm talking about tonight could be, triggering or, making you feel some type of emotion. So if you need to take a second and leave and come back, that's totally fine. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. So, sorry, to keep going, at the bottom of the screen, we see types of community ACEs. So that consists of discrimination, food scarcity, poverty, not being paid enough, poor housing, substandard schools, dealing with historical trauma, poor water and air quality. All of these things, which probably might not sound that unfamiliar to us, are all considered adverse childhood experiences. To the right of the screen where it says environment, these are also ACEs that are starting to show up more. So for example, dealing with wildfires in California, record storms going on around the world that we normally would never see before. Wars can also be considered an environmental ACE. The pandemic, which we're living through right now, is also considered an adverse childhood experience. And we're noticing that it's having an effect on our children's health, which we started to see in the past 2 years more and more. So this is why it's important to talk about and bring awareness to. You're probably wondering who came up with this term adverse childhood experience, or ACE. So it was actually a study done a while ago in California with the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. And it was groundbreaking because it was a huge public health study that was the first of its kind to investigate childhood abuse, neglect, and household challenges. So before then, it hadn't been done on such a large scale. And what they basically did is asked their employees a series of questions that pertain to events that had happened in their childhood. And it's 10 questions. And out of those people who answered, at least 2/3 or over 60% had one adverse childhood experience, which is a very big deal. And it's important because the people who went through this, they're all employees of a huge, corporate company. So most of them were white, middle income, all have access to healthcare, and all have a college education. So, pretty good lives, but they all experienced this thing that happened to them, when they were younger. So some of these things include, like I mentioned before, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, neglect, dealing with family members with substance abuse issues, witnessing violence, having a family member in jail, one or no parents, or experiencing divorce. So the fact that this many people had at least one ACE is a big deal. So imagine what that number is in our communities: minorities, low income, people that don't have the same access to education. That number is probably way bigger, which it is. So what I want to show you on the left is a chart that shows ACEs in Connecticut. And I know it's a lot of numbers, but what I want you to know is all of those colors outside of the red are people who have at least one ACE. So again, that's 60%. That's a lot of people. But what it also shows us is that ACEs are clustered. If you have one, you are way more likely to have at least 2, 3, 4, 5 or more. So that's a big deal, that if you have one of these detrimental life experiences when you're younger, you probably have more and more as you grow up. The second thing I wanted to show you about ACEs in Connecticut is if you look all the way to the right, you see that the types that are most common out of those 10 ACEs are emotional abuse, separated or divorced parent, or a drinking problem in the household. So these are the types of ACEs that we're seeing most common in Connecticut. And that's not to shame anyone, that's just to say that we all may be living with these things consistently on a daily basis, and we may not know how they're affecting our children because we think they're too young and don't take a lot in. But they can understand these things. They might not understand it now, but their body is taking it in and feeling all of it. The next thing I wanted to show you about ACEs in Connecticut is how it affects different people differently. So at the top, you see the blue and the pink bars. It's the same 10 ACEs, but in almost all those cases, the pink bar is higher. So females are experiencing ACEs, obviously, to a higher extent than the male population is. That's the same for the Black and Hispanic populations. So if you see the graph under it, the red and the green bars are the Hispanic and Black populations. And in a lot of those cases, they are higher than white or other minority populations in regards to experiencing these issues. Especially over here, you can see like separated or divorced parent, or drinking problem in household. They're more common in minorities. So why is this all important? Why should I know these ACEs? The reason is because they're connected to people's health. So in Connecticut, a person who has 3 or more ACEs compared to a person who doesn't have any is 5 times more likely to be at risk for depression, 5 times more likely to be a victim of sexual violence, 4 times more likely to, have more risky sex, use needles, things like that. 3 times more likely to be a smoker, 3 times more likely to have some worry in their house, whether that be, for food or for money, whatever it is. 2 times more likely to have less support, and 2 times more likely to be at risk for more health issues such as asthma, COPD, arthritis, all of these diseases which you might have seen in your families before. They're pretty common. This is a short video that explains toxic stress, but because it's in English, I'm not going to play it. I'm going to just talk about it with you guys because I explain it anyway. So basically what toxic stress is we all know what stress is, but when it gets to a toxic or traumatic point is when it feels overwhelming. You feel threatened by something. It results in feeling out of control. You may feel helpless or fearful of everything, and it interferes with your relationships with everyone. That's when stress gets to a toxic point. Not all stress is bad stress. So for example, positive stress, an example can be considered your first day of school. You know, that little feeling of nervousness or anxiousness, or when you're about to get a vaccine, you're a little bit nervous, but you're still going to go through with it. That's an example of positive stress because you feel the anxiousness and then you're able to come back down and feel normal. An example of tolerable stress, which is, a bit more dangerous, but you can still recover, is an example of that is either like losing a loved one or breaking a bone. If you have the right supports, you can come out of those things eventually. It'll take a bit, it'll take a few months or however long, but you can bounce back. Now, toxic stress is when you don't really bounce back. And that's when you experience long periods of adversity. So for example, dealing with abuse for years and years, or seeing violence for years and years. You don't ever really turn back to your baseline because your stress levels are just all over the place. And that's really dangerous. And if you have a question, again, just if you write it in the chat, I'll be able to answer it. I just can't see it right now. So the reason I keep talking about stress is because our body has a stress response, and it's the thing that lets us know that we feel in danger. It's what lets us know that there's a threat. And it helps your body respond to stress effectively, which brings you back to a baseline level. So in order to do that, what the body does is have the fight, flight, or freeze response. And we've probably all heard of this before. When you feel threatened by something, you either, fight it, realize that you can't fight it, so you run away, or you freeze because you know that so you just ready your body for whatever damage is about to happen. I just want to know what this is actually like in person. So I just want to know if anyone's ever had a moment where you felt like you flipped your lid or you lost control of your emotions. You don't have to answer it because it'll be a lot of us talking, but I'll give you when I flipped my lid before, and I was only in kindergarten. So I was on the school bus coming back home from school, and I was sitting next to an older, had to be like in 4th or 5th grade. And there was a boy sitting behind me who kept bothering me, and he kept saying my name wrong on purpose. And I wasn't going to do anything. The girl next to me just kind of kept egging me to do something. And eventually, my little kindergarten self grabbed the seatbelt and hit the boy behind me in the face with the seatbelt, which was not okay. He could have gotten really hurt. And I that was very uncharacteristic of me, especially, as a small, I don't even know how old I was, like 5 or 6 or something. Um, and I didn't understand why I did it, and my parents couldn't understand why I did it. But I'm realizing now, when I was younger, that my dad was an alcoholic, and there I was experiencing a lot of violent situations in the house, and I was scared all the time. And I think the way I released my stress in that moment was I just hit someone. So I just wanted to share that story to show, what is happening when we are losing control of our emotions or when our stress response is overwhelmed. Now, I just want to show you a quick example of what's happening in your brain when that goes on, and why do you feel like when you are overwhelmed or so stressed out that you say or do things that you don't mean and you want to take back right away. So if you hold your hand up, you don't have to do this, but this is just a hand model of the brain. If you hold your hand up, in the middle, your thumb is your amygdala, and that is what is responsible for sensing danger in your brain. So this is the thing that tells your body to, fight, flight, or freeze. At the top of it, that the thing that sits over it is your prefrontal cortex. So this is the part of your brain that makes us human. It helps us with our emotion and to make complex decisions. So that's all of this. That's the thing that makes us smart. And when you are overwhelmed and you are experiencing consistent stress, such as toxic stress, such as, being abused over and over for years, your prefrontal cortex goes offline, and that's when you just flip your lid. So that's what happened to me in that moment. I felt so overwhelmed. My brain felt so overwhelmed, and I just lost it. And that's why when you are feeling like that, it's hard to make rational decisions when you get upset, So I'm sure all of us have had that moment where, we got physical when we didn't want to. But it really probably was us feeling, so stressed out that we just reacted and it happened. So the way that this looks in our children and what's happening is when they are exposed to toxic stress over time, it leads to their health being damaged. And it can interfere with how they're learning at school and their school environment. And it may affect how they are acting in the school environment. So for example, if they are feeling stressed and overwhelmed a lot of the time, they might start fighting, they might start not paying attention as much. They don't have as many friends because, they're not putting in the effort. And they can start getting a lot of health problems, such as asthma. I didn't get asthma until I was 11. I wasn't born with it. So I wonder, where did it come from? A lot of children can have memory problems. And what it looks like when a child is, overwhelmed or experiencing toxic stress, they want to say, I can't hear you, I can't respond to you, I'm just trying to be safe. And that's all they're trying to do. Their nervous systems are just trying to, return to that baseline level just to try to keep themselves safe. Now, over time, if we keep getting stressed out and we never come back to that baseline, there are a lot of health problems that we may develop in our future. So for example, smoking, dealing with substance abuse, such as, alcoholism, drugs, not doing as much physical activity, missing work. Those are all examples of things that can happen if we don't recognize ACEs and what they can be doing to our stress responses. Developing heart disease later, cancer, stroke, all of these things that, excuse me, we don't normally associate with trauma. We just think it's a medical issue. They can be caused by things that are happening, when we're younger and we don't even know it. But we want to get the word out to more and more people, right? Such as school leaders. And that's why we're doing this class today, so that more and more people can know that it can be affecting our children. The reason that we should care is because trauma can turn off kids' learning switch. They may read less, have a lower reading level, may not as have a high GPA as we may want, having a higher rate of school absences, so skipping school more and more children dropping out, and more suspensions and expulsions because they are acting out in a school setting. When, a lot of the teachers may be thinking that children are just behaving bad because they're bad, they may just be traumatized. Again, a traumatized kid sees the world as a dangerous place, including school. So they may be coping in ways that teachers really don't appreciate. The activity, aggression, defiance, withdrawal, even perfectionism is a form of coping. But the good news is that our brains are plastic and we want to heal. So although we as children may have had all of these negative experiences, there are ways that we can heal, and the things that have happened to us as children are not the guaranteed predictor of who we end up in life. This young lady, she had a very hard childhood. She was actually grew up in poverty, molested by her father, became a mother at a very young age, used to sleep with rats, all of these terrible things. This young lady became a child actress about 6 or 7. She was exposed to a world of drugs and alcohol from a very young age. She ended up going into rehab, I think, when she was about 14. And all of those experiences are, very heavy for a child to deal with, but they ended up being Oprah and Drew Barrymore. So what I'm trying to say is that these two women now are very, very successful, and they have used their platforms to talk about their adverse childhood experiences and the trauma they've dealt with when they were younger, to show that it's not your end all be all, and that you can achieve your dreams and everything that you want, and you can be successful and happy later in life, despite all the things that you have experienced. I'm also not going to play that video, it's too long. We're more than ACEs in our trauma. The more we ask for help, develop trusting relationships, the more we listen to people's feelings, we can start introducing protective factors that combat these adverse childhood experiences. Having friends, supportive social connections, knowledge about parenting and child development. Millie's lovely presentation about knowing your parents' rights. That's how we combat ACEs and improve resilience in children. Extending empathy, mercy, grace, alternative disciplines like community service, giving wounded students different ways to express themselves through music, art, any creative outlet. Building self-esteem for children, finding redeeming qualities in children. So letting them know that you see that they're kind and that they're trying and that you love them and that you're there for them. And understanding and working on students' emotional intelligence. So what that really means is, like, in a situation when you're in the classroom and as a teacher, you see, a child struggling, speaking to them, asking them, how are you feeling? Do you need a second? let's talk. Let's go outside the room. Let's go to a safe space so that they understand why they're feeling that way. They can get those emotions out and not react so aggressively. And self-care. Self-care, you have to take care of yourself before you take care of anyone else. And this is just a quote that I shared. So when little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not join their chaos. So when children are feeling overwhelmed, we can't also feel overwhelmed. We have to find ways to help them keep calm. And just to end, I want to show you two big questions that can really change how we view the world. Instead of asking what's wrong with you to a child, why are you acting this way? You know, why did you do that? Go to the corner. All these things that you want to ask. Instead, why don't you consider asking what happened to you? What's going on at home? What's going on in your life that's causing you to react this way? What's stressing your response system, you know, that is making you act this way? I know this is a lot of information and it's could be overwhelming. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to me. My name again is Adriana, and you can email me at adriana@harvardparentuniversity.org.